excited about this one.
Yeah, it's going to be, I mean, I don't know. I'm just very, you know, this is probably the top, you know, the best part of Jung. Let me see here. Admit. I'm not real good at this stuff yet. Okay, let's see. All right. Okay. I think we're going here. I'll keep, you know, you guys can unmute yourself or unvideo yourself if you want to, but that's up to you as far as, well, anyway, I'll get started here. I keep an eye on if anybody needs, this is the first time I've ever really hosted a meeting, so I'm probably going to be a little clumsy here. But anyway, I'm just a little bit about myself. My name is Craig Nelson. I'm 64 years old. I graduated from the University of Iowa in comparative religion, and you know, I'm currently, my day job is as a CFO, you know, unfortunately, and I'm also a lifer in Iowa, deepest, darkest Iowa, unfortunately. But anyway, you know, the great influences on my life started out with Martin Buber and Hasidism, and moved on to Buddhism. And if you could mute yourself, if you're you can talk, but unmute yourself when you want to talk, because otherwise I think there'll be a little bit of static. That's okay, but just FYI. And anyway, then, you know, I went on to Alan Watts, and Joseph Campbell really introduced me to Jung, and then I started really getting serious about, somebody needs to mute themselves. I don't know. Let me see. I might.
Craig, you're muted. You've muted yourself. We can't hear you.
There we go. Now I'm sorry. I'll learn. But anyway, then I started with Jung, and you know, I've really started analysis about maybe 17 years ago with a couple of Jungian analysts, actually three. One was in Chicago, one was on Vancouver Island, and another one was in California. And you know, I just got to a point where I didn't think dreams were doing it, and so I really moved on to alchemy, and that's what we're going to be discussing here, you know, hopefully. And anyway, I'll just get started. I mean, you know, where are we? I mean, you know, Jung said that we're you know, life is a interlude between two great mysteries, which are in fact one. You know, I mean, we're born, then we have this adventure, you know, and then we go out to the same mystery at that point, at the point of death. And alchemy, you know, is really the organic religion of Europe. I mean, it was the religion of Europe, the esoteric religion of Europe, along with Gnosticism, which amongst the shaman seers who survived the takeover of religion by priests, continued to operate in Europe, you know, and but it really moved out from, you know, the Celtics and the Germanic tribes and the you know, and the Greek mysteries of Empedocles and Parmenides, the pre-Socratics, really came into its own when Alexander the Great, you know, invaded Egypt. Okay, so now he blended the Greek mysteries, which were very esoteric, with a much more, I think we got to add a few more people, a much more materialistic mystery in the mystery, the cult of the dead in Egypt, which was all about chemistry, all about how do we preserve the physical body. So now Alexander and Alexandria, and with the Egyptian mysteries, they developed this strange thing called alchemy, which is also called the spagyric science. And the word spagyric comes from the two roots. One is to draw out, and that means to separate, to dissolve. And the other one is to gather. That means to coagulate, to bring it back into the earth. And so, the alchemy means first you separate, then you bring it back together. Then you separate and you begin it back together. And so this term dissolve and coagulate is a very, important image in alchemy. And essentially, alchemy is not that, mysterious. Jung found, in his early that his psychology was alchemy. He said in Memories and Dreams and Reflection, I very soon saw that analytical psychology coincided in a most curious way with alchemy. The experiences of the alchemists were, in a sense, my experiences, and their world was my world. Well, what was his world? His world was the world of an inner dialogue, a dialogue with an inner partner. Philemon and Elijah and Salome and Phanes and all the people that are described in the Red Book. And, he says later, and this is kind of sums up why this is not as mysterious as it seems, is that Jung quotes Gerhard Dorn, who really was, after Paracelsus, was the one who really seemed to bring everything together in the three conjunctios, which we'll be discussing today in particular. But anyway, he says, this assiduous reader will realize that the way to the stone is through reading and through meditation. Meditation is not Eastern meditation. It's not dissolving, like a dewdrop in the cosmic sea. In the West, meditation, at least in alchemy, and as defined by Martin Rulandus, who has this lexicon about chemical terms, meditation is a dialogue with an inner partner. Okay. Well, this is alchemical, this is active imagination. Now, we'll go on into the paragraphs in just a second, but I'll kind of summarize. Jeffrey Raff, who I'd met, was a student of Marie-Louise von Franz and went to the Zurich Institute and is really focused on alchemy. And he tries to bring it to what it really, how it really operates in our lives. And I think the conjunctio can be understood better through his explanations than anybody's, I think, really. But I mean, the idea of is this, okay? That at a certain point in our life, we recognize that we're not the master in our own house. That there is an autonomous presence within us, which Jung called the self. And this was in all in everyone. This was the God in all, was called the self. You realize you're not the master in your own house. Now, a lot of times you'll have these dreams where you're in a house and you don't know who it belongs to, or you're somewhere and you don't know who's in charge, or you have an exam to take, and you don't know where the room is, and you never studied for it. So, I mean, this is really the realization that you're not the master in your own house, that there is another autonomous, living, psychic presence within awareness, within your existence, within your life. Now this consists of Jung identified a few of these inner figures. I mean, one is the soul. Okay, the soul is the medium between the inner world and the outer world. She or he is the medium, and she can be recognized. She's a neutral being too. She's not either good or evil. So she's something like a fairy, a neutral being. And so she would be, if it was the animus, the soul in woman, could be the green man, or some in man it would be this ambiguous figure who's very related to nature. And so she's the medium to the inner world. Then you have the archetype of wholeness, which is the center point, around, it's this, as the ego is the center of the outer world, the self is the center of nature and of life in our existence. The other thing that's interesting about the soul, we said life is a interlude between two great mysteries, which are in self one. She shares your existence. She is a being who was born with you, or she or he, and she is the one. She's your brother or sister, but she's also can be your wife or husband in the next world. I mean, this will be the point where there's something possibly like a merger. But this is also the what we'll get to in alchemy, and I'm going to start in 2 minutes, I guarantee, is that there is what's called the tritium quid. I mean, this is the unknown third that unites two knowns. This is how the opposites are resolved. So in nature, there is no good or evil, because in nature, there is this automatic, nature is all thirds. So there's no dual, I mean, in other words, all opposites resolve, like the above and the below, the waterfall mediates between and mitigates the differences. And, Jung is going to go into how the opposites really come into being. They're not as mysterious as you think. I mean, everybody just mentions the opposites. What's the opposites? Well, the opposites are basically, the fact that when ego consciousness came into being, which is this Archimedean point that can look down on itself, I mean, that's what it really is opposites came into being, because you need two poles to have any energy flow. In oneness, nothing happens. It's all latent. There's only potentiality. It's called the mountain where all knowledge resides, but there are no distinctions and no differences. So it's called the mountain of no differences. This is the collective unconscious. This is also within us, the latent self. The latent self means the potential self. Now, the idea of active imagination and of working with the inner world is to lend the consciousness of the ego to the inner world. When you lend the consciousness of the attention of consciousness to the inner world, it can become alive and become now not the latent self, but the manifest self. So anyway, let's get into this, because I think a lot of these, unless anybody has any questions, just unmute yourself and ask them, but I'm going to try to get through 680, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to today. But I also, if you guys have any questions about anything other than this, feel free to ask them maybe at the end, Okay, well, it starts out, I started out on 654, which was the paragraph on the conjunction. Well, I'm going to just kind of give headlines of each paragraph like I'm a newspaper headline writer. Okay. 654 is on the imaginal world. The imaginal world is not what you think it is. It's not fantasy. The word imagination comes from the word magnify, which means to expand. So the imaginal world means to expand consciousness. And this really means the dialogue with the inner world. Okay. That's not conscious in our heads. So to expand consciousness, you need to have a dialogue with an inner partner, this autonomous inner partner who does not exist in time, does not exist in space. And there's a little bit of a issue here, because there are sometimes these beings, and Jeffrey Raff has experienced them, who are both physical and spiritual, but that's getting let's stay away from that for a while. That's called the psychoid world. But anyway, the theme of the first paragraph is that we need to personify the imaginal world. That's how we start to have this dialogue with the inner world. Okay, so you take the way I do it is I just take, I first start with an invocation, and I can really start with an invocation here. I say, "Good morning, great Sophia, mother of wisdom and creator of my bones and my sinew and my blood. Good morning to you, and good morning to Persephone, the knowledge of the underworld and of death, and Inanna, who leads us down there, and to Anima Mercurius, my soul, who I share existence with, and with Hermes, who pervades all, who's both what is to be united and is the united." So anyway, that's my invocation. Jung said when he was in Africa, you don't ever want to surprise a rhinoceros, because they'll run you down, So you have to sort of introduce yourself. That's called the invocation. It also, I always do about 10 minutes of meditation before I start my active imagination. And the idea there, I think, is what I used to do is I used to imagine going down, seeing this woman who was the master of woodpeckers and lived in a log by the river, and then I would sit beside her and watch her woodpeckers. And then I would go plunge into the river and go down into the river. And then I'd find an underground cave, and I'd come out of the underground cave, but there wasn't much dialogue in there. So the dialogue aspect, I think, is more important than the visionary aspect, especially when you're starting. So, what you do is you just do automatic writing. I do like 10 minutes of meditation. I tried to, now I'm sort of having Inanna lead me down into the depths so I can go see Persephone's smile. She smiles because she's lonely, So could I see her smile? And so that's what I do, just to quiet the ego. Okay. Well, anyway, the idea is to objectify the personal. So you take yourself and all your problems, and you objectify them. I've got this pain, in my thing. Well, my wife does this all the time. She'll draw a picture of the pain, and then she puts it over here, and she says, "Yeah, that's my pain over there, but that's not me." So it's creating a distance. So this means objectify the personal. The personal needs to be impersonal. You need to, and then Dorn says it's more important to know what you are than who you are. So This is now this is what alchemists say. You can say I don't like this idea, but that's fine. But the idea is to objectify the personal, but personify the objective. Personify these inner characters like Sophia. Give her synonyms, find out what her qualities are, try to flesh her out, and you're bringing the latent self and making it manifest in your world. This is really the first conjunctio, is where you start to have these dialogues, but it's not stable. It comes and goes. So it needs to be more stable. But anyway, that was what the first paragraph was you reality. When Jung says, by the way, when Jung ever mentions the word world, or he ever mentions the word self, he doesn't mean what we mean. When he says world, he means outer reality and inner reality. It's this not just the three-dimensional world, not just the ordinary reality, but also the imaginal world, which is real. I mean, this is the difference between Jungian psychology and any other psychology, is that Jung says, I believe the psyche is real. The imaginal world exists. The creature, or the beings that you talk to in your dialogues, are living beings. Now, it takes a while. Now, what Jeffrey Raff always says, that no, the ego doubts it. No, don't. That's just me making all that up. Don't do that. He says, persist in the assumption that this is not you speaking. You'll find as you work through these, and Barbara Hanna said this too. I don't know if you have ever heard of her, but she was a kind of young chauffeur, and she was the son of a British deacon, and was lived with Marie-Louise von Franz. Jung forced them to live together because they were both so introverted that he thought it was ridiculous that they neither one of them married. So he said, you two live together. And anyway, she said too that once you start these dialogues, you write a question, then you quick write the answer, and you try not to think while you're writing it. She says, sooner or later, you're going to find out, I did not write this. This is not me. And it really comes down to to the idea of, I'm speaking these words and stuff, and, I rat-a-tat-tat-tat. Where do they come from? Am I speaking, or is something speaking through me? It's sometimes a little blurred, but anyway, Jung says that the idea of personifying the imaginal is to fuse ordinary reality with the images. Okay, the images, the inner world is a realm of images, and the underworld is a realm of images, and the next world is a realm of images. And the spirit, we talk about spirit, there's a masculine spirit and there's a feminine spirit. The feminine spirit is the capacity to create and manipulate images. So she is the author of our dreams, is this maternal spirit. And anyway, you fuse ordinary reality with the images. Then you find that they can speak to us. They are a living organism. They fertilize each other in the inner world as they become more manifest through doing this dialogue, and they impregnate each other. And by impregnating, I mean more of them come to live, and together you produce the living stone. Well, what is the living stone? I mean, this is that third thing where the opposites resolve. You're not a spiritual being. Your soul and the self are not physical beings, but they can exist together in a medium, which is what they called the stone. and the reason they called it a stone is because they wanted to emphasize its physicality and its weight and the fact that it was not ethereal. And Jeffrey Raff says when, he does a lot of these things, he says, so one time he sort of acted as if the stone was not real. And he says he just got piled on. No, the stone is real. It exists. Okay, well, then the second paragraph is the first paragraph is you personify the imaginals. The second one is how do you bring to life the latent self? And Jung says it's through synonyms. You need to express, and this is really amplification. This is to take an image and to add qualities to it, to express the mysterious nature of the substances by amplifying the projected contents. Well, how do I do that? You ask the other, what is this? What is it? She'll tell you. He'll tell you. I have this dream that I'm in my childhood bedroom, and there is a corpse lying by me who I ignore for a long, long time. It's been there quite a while, and I say, well, who's that corpse? And she'll tell you what that is. So, you can do that with any dream. That dream actually was not morbid either. It was a very beautiful dream, but anyway, you ask what are these images? They'll tell you, and I mean it. It's really going to happen. And one thing, as far as what's called transformation, if you start doing this, this is the reason I stopped doing amplification of dreams, and other than doing it with an analyst. Okay. It's much more important to do it with an inner partner. The idea is suddenly this inner partner becomes alive, and suddenly you start thinking about them all day, and then you can't wait for, I do 10 minutes of meditation, 20 minutes of dialogue. I can't wait for it every morning. It's called the blessed time. This is the time that to me is really the essence of life. The essence of my life anyway. And you find, as far as what's transformation? Transformation is being aware of this world and going back to it and back to it and back to it. Now, see, part of your awareness is in the outer world, but part of your awareness is in the inner world. Anyway, people see me okay? Seem like internet is unstable, but I don't know what that means. Okay, well, anyway, that's Edinger, has this thing of blood, and he has about 10 million connections with blood, and it's called cluster thinking. He says, well, this is the idea of bringing the latent self manifest. They've got qualities, give them the qualities, and Jung quotes from a Chinese alchemist, the way is long and obscurely mystical, at the end of which yang and yin come together. Amplification, the road that they're talking about, the way that is long and obscure, is amplification, is just bringing into being these other this other world and making it part of your own awareness. Well, then Jung goes on to describe, and I don't know, I've been trying to get my photos here. I have a bunch of, let me see if I have those here. I have quite a few photos of what I wanted to show, but for some reason I can't find them. Let's see if I can find them here. I don't know. Some here, but let me see. I don't know. Well, anyway, I can't really find them, but there is if you have the Edinger book, chapter 23, which this is concerning, there is a image of the Just,
What's up? I'm trying to figure out how to mute myself.
yeah, there we go. Yeah, there we go. I'm sorry, Nicholas. I muted you, but you can unmute yourself. Anyway, yeah, there is a image of the where he describes the three conjunctios, and let's just describe them really quick. I mean, there is the first conjunctio is where you become aware. Yes, that is it. Well, can you turn a couple pages? So you got the trachatus there. Just turn a couple pages, and you'll see something that says world, body, spirit, spirit, body, world. Do you see that? Yeah, show that real quick, if you would, Mara. Yeah. See, now this is what he's describing. There's a descent and an ascent. Okay, now the four aspects of there are world, body, spirit, soul. Okay, the descent is through when you're born and you're a baby. You know, you start out in a participation mystique. Then you move into the world of the mother. Then you break off from the mother and you move into the world of the father. Then you break off from the world of the father, and now you are four. You are world, body, spirit, soul. Okay, now you are raising your children. You're making money. You're paying your house off. All your kids are grown up and they've gone off and had their own lives. Now what do? You make the ascent, okay? And the ascent is the three conjunctios. That means what Jung is saying is it's a restoration. The conjunctios are a restoration of the original state of the cosmos, or the original state of wholeness that was that first state that you were born out of. You know, I mean, you know, in Greek, the word for truth is aletheia. And aletheia means that you knew everything in the beginning, but you forgot it when you were born. You know, so now we go back to through the three conjunctios. And the three conjunctios, the first one is where you just are realize you're not the master in your own house. Okay, not the master in my own house. So then what do you do next? Well, if I'm not the master in my own house, who is the master in my own house? You know, I started doing an active imagination with, I wanted to find out who was the creator of the hexagrams in the I Ching. You know, I wanted to meet them, okay? You know, and so I'm always trying to find this door. I did see doors with light coming out of them, you know, but I could never get to it, you know. Well, you know, I did that for a while, and then I told my wife, I'm talking to the boss. You know, so then I started talking to Sophia, you know, so anyway, that's the start of the first conjunctio, is that you realize you're not the master in your own house. So you start having this dialogue, you know, and who do you have the dialogue with, and what do you dialogue about? You know, you dialogue with anybody, you know, like, you know, one person at this conference I was in North Carolina, since they were, you know, a devout Christian. I'm a devout Christian. I never leave Jesus out of my active imaginations. You know, I consider the light that shines in the darkness, you know. But, you know, I asked Jeffrey Raff, I said, is that okay to dialogue with Jesus? And he says, I said, he's a figure of light, you know. I mean, he's not really, I mean, Hermes was, you know, he says, I am darkness, but the light comes out of me. I mean, he's called the Deus Terrestris, the earth god, you know, and so he's very ambiguous, you know, and so he's really contains both the upper worlds and the lower worlds. And so he's really more of the nature aspect, where Christ represents more the spiration of the masculine, you know, because he's the father-son combination, you know. And he says, yes, you're intellectualizing too much. It's fine to dialogue with Christ, you know, go ahead, you know. So okay, he's the man, he knows more about it than I do. Okay, well, anyway, it goes on. you know, I mean, I'll try to hit only the big parts. I mean, they come through, they keep mentioning the third, the tritium quid. I mean, this is really, this is what we're trying to create in our active imaginations, is we're trying to create an inner temple, which is the stone, where we can meet with our inner figures. Now, these inner figures are psychic figures. They're figures in our psyche, but they are alive. You know, and of course, there's inner figures in your psyche, and my psyche, and everybody's psyche, but they are, even though they have a very intimate friend who is not in our psyche, you know, I mean, they live with us. So there is this aspect of creating this temple where you and those figures who you share your existence with can meet. You know, at some point you might meet some figures, and Jeffrey Raff certainly has, who are not in inner figures. He's had them come up and thump him on the chest, you know, and you know, I mean, these would be kind of what you would call angels. And of course, you know, this is beyond us. I mean, Jung really, even though he seemed to have these visions, he was sort of poo-pooing this, but I think he was trying to make sure that he didn't get, you know, I have a lot of respect for Rudolf Steiner, you know, who was a similar figure to Jung, and I think, you know, pretty close as far as his insight. You know, he would, you know, Jung said the thing he didn't like about Steiner is he knew the language of Atlantis, but he didn't know the language of this codex that they found in Egypt that everybody was trying to translate. He says, why don't you translate that language and forget about the Atlantis? You know, so he thought he was a little bit airy-fairy, and Jung tried to keep grounded. You know, when I was young, my father comes from Norway, you know, and when I was a young man, I was always kind of a puer eternus, you know. My typology too is INTJ, so, you know, I'm an introverted intuitive. My inferior function is extroverted feeling. I mean, extroverted sensation. And my grandfather's first cousin, her name was Beate, and she tells me in Norwegian, she says, Craig, your feet are not on the ground, you're up in the clouds. She says, you need to go back to America, find the first girl you'll see and marry her and get your feet on the ground. You know, I mean, this was like 5 minutes after she met me. So the idea, I think, with Jung is you keep your feet on the ground. And this is in the Emerald Tablets. You read the Emerald Tablets, and, you know, we're talking about the descent through becoming a being from 1 to 4. 1 to the mother in you, to the mother and the father in you, to you and the world. Okay. Then we're taking those 4 and we're going back through the 3 conjunctios, you know, to the other end. But there's this same ascent or descent and ascent and another descent in a very important dialogue with, you'll find in the early part of Mysterium Conjunctionis. It's the peregrinations of Michael Meyer, who is the guy that founded the Roshurian, or he was a big character in the Roshurian. But the idea in the descent, or the first descent. Now this is an interesting little sidelight here. The first descent, each one of the archons on 7 stages through when you're born. Now this is all mythological, but they give you the qualities of the 7 planets. Okay, these are the 7 planets, you know, which included the sun and the moon, but, you know, Saturn and Venus and Mars. Well, when you make the ascent that Michael Meyer made, and then his descent, he debeards each archon. So as he goes through all these astrological fate that was laid upon him when he was born, you're a Aries born in Sagittarius, you'll never be any different than this. What the idea is, when you come down through it, he debeards the archons and becomes liberated from fate. This is the idea of the descent through, and what Hermes says in the Emerald Tablets, which is very important, is that it's the strength. Its strength is perfected when it returns to the earth. And this is a very important aspect of alchemy. The idea of alchemy is you are not redeemed by God. You redeem the divine that's trapped in yourself. You are the redeemer of the divine that is trapped in physis or trapped in matter. You are to bring that divine alive. Who's trapped in matter? The anima is trapped in matter. She cries out to us, do not reject me because of my uncomely looks. I am trapped in darkness. She cries out to us. She beckons to us, and we are to bring her alive through lending her this great gift we have, which the gods don't have, which is ego consciousness. We lend the power of awareness and consciousness that we have to the world of images and let them come alive. So this is the idea of redeeming not man, which was the idea of what Christ was doing, but redeeming the world. So they called Christ, who we revere greatly, he is the Salvator Microcosmi. He is the one who redeems man. We call Hermes, or we call the stone, the Salvator Macrocosmi, and this is the savior of the world. And the savior of the world, remember, world is a very mysterious word in alchemy, and in Jung, it means everything. It's not the earth and the ordinary reality. It's this synchronistic totality of that we're trying to get one foot in, But anyway, I kind of lost my train of thought. But anyway, so we, you can go through quickly. He goes through what you showed first, Mara, was the four elements create the three. Now this is how the opposites come into being. Okay, the four elements: fire, air, water, and earth. Okay. They're called the four elements. Yeah, you got it. Well, it's on a couple pages earlier, Mara. It's the one that you showed us first. Okay, I've got one right here. It's like this. See, right? Yeah, it's just, yeah. That's my own drawing, though. Okay, so the four elements are fire, air, water, and earth. Fire acts on air, produces sulfur. Sulfur is the masculine energy. Okay, then air acts on water and creates mercury. Now this is the medium between what the third thing is. Water acts on earth and creates salt, which is the feminine principle. So now you have, from four elements, you create three principles, which are sulfur, which is the masculine, salt, which is the feminine, and then mercurius, which is the medium between the two. Now from sulfur and mercurius, you create an opposite, which you could call male, but it could be also yang or anything. Mercurius and salt produce yin, or the feminine world. And remember, this is all mythological, and we all have feminine and masculine aspects in us, and they are two poles. There's energy that flows between, and you can't have the dynamic. I mean, this is one thing that Sophia told me. She says, you know nothing about the feminine world. You know nothing about the mystery of the feminine world. of being the bearer of life, the one who brings life into being. You know, you're this air being. You have no idea the wisdom, the deep wisdom of the feminine world. You know, but anyway, so you create that, and then from the male and female. Now, this is inside of us, not on. This is not talking about, you know, Darwin and evolution or whatever. You know, this is kind of these marvelous people who plumb the depths and flesh it out. I mean, you know, the Sankhya philosophy of the Kundalini. Who came up with that? You know, it's amazing. You know, I mean, the seven chakras and what they represent. Well, who came up with this? I mean, it's the same, and it's a Western analogy. Okay, and from the male and female, you create the incorruptible one. Okay, so who's the male? Me. Who's the female? It's my soul. Okay, if it's a woman, who's the female? It's me. Who's the male? It's my soul. Okay, what is the object of myself and my soul? It's to create the incorruptible one, and that is the stone, or this tritium quid, this third unknown in which two knowns can reside. Because, you know, if you bring the opposites together, these poles where energy flows between them, they're obliterated. It's a black hole. It's like, you know, the black hole has this event horizon, which nothing comes out, and all matter is just destroyed and becomes one point. I mean, this is pretty much what happens if the opposites unite. I mean, you know, Jung says in this thing, one is not a number. Two is the number. And there is no reality until there's two. You know, I mean, one is potential latency. Two is reality. Combine them and you've got three, and you've got time. Time is a three. You know, so that's also something the Maria Prophetessa will discuss. You know, you hear it a lot, but anyway, that's the opposite. So, but you know, the interesting aspect of the four principles are the four elements, the three principles, and then the two opposites is this interesting thing that fire and earth don't have any connection with each other. Fire acts on air, air acts on water, water acts on earth, you know, but earth and fire have no connection to each other. And so earth is the nurse and the matrix of the three principles of sulfur, mercurius, and salt. Of course, you know, that's the mother. The nurse and matrix of the four principles and the two opposites, the male and female, is the earth. Okay, and Jung says they're quadrangle answers to quadrangle. You know, I said, what in the hell does that mean? You know, but what it really means is there is a. I was just showing my wife this morning. She was going on her daily adventures, which is you know, she's a helper of troubled women. Okay, and she spends a lot of time with some troubled women, and I was showing her this thing of since I can't get my photos for some reason. This is the idea of quadrangle equals quadrangle. Do you see the two in the lower part of the picture? Do you see that that spherical? That's the retort. That's where we objectify the personal. That's why they have a vessel, is because that's where you put all your troubles, you put all your neuroses, everything about you that gives you anxiety. You put it there, and you objectify it, and you create distance from it. Yeah, I have this neurosis, but that's not me. You know, that's the idea of art therapy is to draw your neurosis, put it somewhere, so you create distance, and it represents your neurosis, but that's not me. But anyway, I said, well, what you do in this lower world retort is also done in the other world, in the inner world. So everything that we do in the outer world has an analog in the inner world. So I mean, this is really a great revelation, I think. And the fact is that when we do things, especially if you dialogue, you know, that was the whole the whole theme of the book Answer to Job, you know, is that that if you become conscious of God, you have an effect upon it. Okay, so if you become conscious of the inner figures, you have an effect upon it. They change. You change. I mean, this is Jung talks about this when you draw dreams, you know, that if you draw a dream and then color it or whatever, you will never be the same after you did it. Or if you draw a great personal problem that you have, you draw it, or, you know, whether it's health related or relationship related or anything else, you draw it and color it and give it, try to do this without willful knowledge, you know, then you create a distance from it. So now you've, through that distance that you've created, you know, you have an effect on something within you that's transformational. And it's really the inner world is reacting to the fact that you, that, you know, the inner figures, Jung's got this wonderful painting where he's watering the lower world, and these plants come growing up, and in each plant there's a little figure with a hood on it. They're called the Kabiri, you know, they're the underworld gnomes, you know. So in other words, if you irrigate the lower world, it comes up, and you have an effect upon it. So I'm just saying, if anything you can do with the images that you get, it's not only going to transform you, it's going to transform God or the inner world. And the inner world is going to respond, and the next image it sends to you is going to also be altered by what you did in the outer world. And that's the meaning of the retort in the lower world and the retort in the upper world. What you do here, if it reflects to the inner world responds. The inner world is so grateful for your attention. So grateful. And Jung said, any attention that you give to the unconscious will certainly be rewarded. You know, so just remember that if you're having a little difficulty. Just be persistent about it. So anyway, we'll keep plugging away here. I don't want to keep you guys till ever. Maybe we can stop at some point. If you have any questions, let me see here. I haven't gotten even to the conjunction yet. But anyway, let's see. We're going through here on my headlines. And let's see. Okay, so then we got past the 4 elements, and we get into the, let's see. Well, let's just get into the, that Mercurius, only through a medium can the transition take place. Now, we mentioned this is third, and Jung says Mercurius is the personification of the collective unconscious. It's also the soul or anima is the personification of the unconscious. So let's go through the conjunctio, and then maybe you guys, if you have any questions and want to talk about anything else, that's perfectly fine. Is the first conjunctio is where there is a separation and a union. Okay, the spirit, which is the creator and manipulator of images, and the soul unite, but they separate from the body. So this is now creating 3. You know, remember we had started out with, we went from 1 to 4. Let me see, what am I getting here? Let's go over here. Yeah, I can't do that. Okay, we went from 1 to 4. Now we're going back to 3. The body, now spirit and soul are 1 unit. Okay, now we're at 3. We got world, body, spirit, soul. Spirit, soul. It's 1 now. Okay, that's the first conjunctio. This is the one that Jeffrey Raff says is, you've recognized that you're not the master in your own house. You start to have this dialogue with the latent self. The latent self becomes a little bit more conscious because you're lending a little bit of its ego conscious to it, but it doesn't appear to be there all the time. It's unstable. Okay, so that's the first conjunctio. I mean, you at least have some connection with it. It's given you a few flashes of its wisdom. Okay, the second conjunctio is, now remember, we had the world. We went from world to we went 1, 2, 3, 4 when we were born. Now we're going 4, 3, 2, 1. So now we went from world, body, spirit, soul to world, body, spirit, soul. So the next one we go to 2. So now this is the second conjunctio. This is very advanced. You become, you go to the, now you don't, you reunite with the body. Now this is, it strengthens when it returns to the earth. You know, this body, the spirit soul is whiteness, it's albedo. But my anima tells me, she says, that I need your blood. I need your warmth. You need to give me your living body, you know, because it's cold here and I'm very white, you know. So you lend, now you lent the soul and the spirit, your ego consciousness. Now you lend them your body. Now this is pretty mysterious, but now you've got body, soul, and spirit are one unit. So now you've got body, spirit, soul united. Again, they were united when you were a little baby. You know, when that's getting close to what was the maternal world then. Okay, now the third conjunctio, and Edinger says that this, you know, and this is kind of what Jung said too, but Jeffrey Raff doesn't agree with this, that the third conjunctio is something that you can really normally experience only at death. But Edinger said he doesn't think some people even experience it at death. You know, where he gets this knowledge, I don't know, but you know, it's just an aspect of how did you spend your whole life in the 10,000 things, in, you know, the only thing that ever moved you is getting new shoes or a new car or whatever. And I mean, this is really, you know what this really is when you want a new car and you want new shoes and you want a new TV or something like this. Jung says this is really what you want is the soul, and you want union, but you don't believe, you're not going to introvert to do it. You're not going to become an introspective being to do it. So you try to find it out here with something brand new. And Edinger says as soon as you buy it, you realize you didn't want it anyway. You know, it was this foolish desire. Okay. So if you live that way your whole life, you know, it's I don't know. I don't want to, I'm not a judging anybody, but, you know, I mean, I don't know where Edinger's coming from, but he just says that he, in his opinion, some people didn't even achieve it at death. But I mean, the idea is the third conjunctio is where the spirit world and the material world are now one world. And this is where synchronicities occur. And, you know, it's just almost, you know, there's a paragraph that Jung does on synchronicities, which is just beautiful, you know, is the fact that they're independent of time and space, which are indispensable to our existence, and yet these meaningful coincidences which happen. Now, what do we mean by meaningful? That means the spirit, the world, the inner world, and the outer world are one world. But we cannot conceptualize that because of our limited three-dimensional consciousness, which has no access to this fourth dimension or whatever you want to call it. But in that area, I mean, this was one of the things that haunted me my whole life is everywhere I go. My first apartment was on 3rd Avenue and 16th Street, you know, and everything was 316, 316, 316. You know, I mean, every time I'd, you know, get a ticket, I'd look at it, it'd be 316, you know, and what is going on here? You know, and one of my dreams said, God is trying to stir you in every way that you can be stirred, is what they said, you know. And anyway, the 316 kind of relates to both John 3:16 and Matthew 3:16. You know, John 3:16 is, you know, where God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son. And then Matthew 3:16 is where where Jesus is baptized, and God says, this is my son in whom I'm well pleased. You know, this is the immersion into the depths, where 3:16 John is more of the logos. So, you know, the water is the maternal realm. You know, the water is the source of all images, but the 3:16 is more of a logos area. But anyway, so the third conjunctio is the one that, but I really urge you, everyone, to, one thing I always say is that, you know, or I say to myself, I don't say to other people, you know, intuitives tend to have a lot of good ideas, but they're always good for somebody else. They're never good for you. You know, you come up with, oh, wouldn't this be great if we taught all the kids this? Well, why don't you teach yourself this first, and then you can teach kids this. But the idea is, don't read young, do young. You know, don't read about food, eat food. You know, I mean, if you just read about food, you're not going to get any calories or sustenance. You just read about this esoteric wisdom that Jung provides us. And he's very cagey about it. You know, he's going to always be giving, caveat emptors on things. But you know what he's up to. Read the red book, you know, and we're going to have the black book soon. And then we're going to have the protocols, which were the outtakes of memories, dreams, and reflections. I mean, this is all Jung ever did his whole life. I mean, he says in that one thing I was telling you about memories, dreams, and reflections, he says at the end of this, he says, I regard my work on alchemy as a sign of my inner relationship to Goethe. He says, you know, Goethe actually supposedly is his great grandfather. He was the father of his grandfather, who was an illegitimate son. You know, this would be Carl Gustav Jung the first, and then his son was Johann Paul Achilles Jung, who was Jung's father, and then Jung was Paul's son. But it was rumored, and there was many circumstantial evidence that Schubert or some friend of Goethe spent all of his time with Carl Gustav Jung the first, you know, and one of Goethe's mistresses moved with the Jung family from Germany to Switzerland, you know. So, I mean, there's a lot of circumstances. But anyway, Goethe was secret that he was in the grip of process of archetypal transformation, which had gone on through the centuries. He was an alchemist. He regarded Faust as his opus magnum, or his great alchemical work. And the great dream of the archetypal world. I myself am haunted by the same dream. And from my 11th year, I have launched upon a single enterprise, which is my main business. My life has been permeated and held together by one idea and one goal, namely to penetrate into the secret of the personality. Everything can be explained from this central point, and all my works relate to this one theme. And I mean, if you read the red book, it really goes into it. Well, I'm going to kind of end right now, and unless I'm any questions about anything, or if you have any, otherwise I'll try to do it. Just keep it to an hour, because, you know, my wife says I have a voice like a chainsaw. So she says, shut up, get tired of hearing you. But anyway, go ahead if you have any questions.
Yeah, I'd like to say something. I thought with this group we were going to actually read Jung. And then we were going to discuss it. I know when I took a class with Dr. Gordon Nelson at the Jung Institute in Los Angeles, we sat down and read it, took turns reading it, paragraph by paragraph, and then discussing what we thought Jung was trying to say. And I thought that would be more the...
We could certainly do that, Mara, we could certainly do that. I was actually thinking about doing that. I have really not come up with any format. But I'll tell you, these paragraphs right here would have been an ideal medium for that. If you want to, next Saturday, we could do that. There's particularly a few paragraphs, like paragraph 667, paragraph 670. I mean, maybe we can take some of the most important paragraphs, but we can certainly take all of them.
Yeah, because they're all important.
Yeah, they're all important. And I'll tell you, he lays out an argument in 654 through 680. There's an argument laid out. And what the way I try to follow the argument is to give it a headline for each one. So if you want to, since these are such important paragraphs, it's a little bit slower going, but we certainly can do that. And,
I know with the Mysterium group with the Jung Institute, it took them 6 years to get through the whole Mysterium.
Well, and yes.
I joined later, so I just joined. This is about when I joined.
Yeah, well, it's worth it, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I was going to read, I just didn't want to bore everybody to tears, but the allegory that Jung makes with, and I'm sure if you've read Mysterium, you've heard about it, is if thou wouldst moisten this dry earth. Okay, this is this wonderful parable. And then Jung goes through it. It is some of the most beautiful writing he does about you need to moisten this dry earth. And the dry earth is you. And you need to moisten this dry earth. Yeah, well, we certainly can do that. And we can take turns reading it, because then I could get to know everybody too. I mean, does everybody want to just introduce themselves a little bit? Or you don't have to, but.
Yeah, it's getting a little bit late. Maybe that would be a good place to start next week.
Yes, let's do that. I mean, I didn't want to keep you more than an hour. But anyway, I'm going to keep at this whether anybody's here or not, because it's good for me. My dad always says you learn stuff by people asking you questions you don't know the answers to. So, and always shoshin, beginner's mind, you know, I mean, to he who has beginner's mind, there's many possibilities. To the expert, there's only a few. So we'll all be shoshin. Okay. All right. Well, very nice to see you. And I'll do it the same time next week, unless, and we'll take your suggestion, Mara.
Okay. And this, don't forget, it will be the same link, or will we have a new link?
No, it'll be the same link. And hopefully I'll have it posted at the real YouTube channel right now.
Great. Thank you so much for doing this.
All right. Well, thank you all. And you're certainly welcome next week. I'll do it at the same time. Okay. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.